Now we're going to move into the more meaty part of the show that we're calling Processing Out Loud. This is the portion of the podcast where we're going to dive into topics we've been thinking about or wrestling with and really just invite you along for the journey. Today we were at the Families Belong Together march or rally, and it brought up a lot of questions for us, a lot of thoughts. And so like most Processing Out Loud segments will be, it's really just us entering in a conversation together to unpack some stuff and ask some questions of each other and explore some areas around this topic together.
Yeah. I mean, literally, it's interesting. We had planned to talk about something else. Mm-hmm. And as we were leaving the rally, we're like, no, this is fresh for us. Yeah. Like, we just started talking like normal friends do, just processing like what that was like for you and what our thoughts are around it. We thought, these are the conversations that we want to be having, but like, we wanted to intentionally put this on the podcast because these are the kind of conversations we feel like maybe some of you want to have with your friends, and it feels dicey or unsafe or like, or too heavy, quite frankly.
Or like you don't know enough to have a conversation around it. And that is the last thing we want to be, you know?
Right.
Like, we can come with our questions, we can come with our naiveties, we can come with our misconceptions. Yes. And not that we aren't trying to grow, we're trying to learn and we're trying to grow, but let's show up as we are and talk about it.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was like, this feels pressing in our spirits right now, and this feels like an appropriate podcast topic because of the topic itself, sure, but also because, part of the thing that we want to do on this podcast is this is going to sound so teacher-student, and please hear our hearts in this. It's not because we think we just have it down, but is to model what safety in a friendship can look like, quite frankly. So anyway, as we were leaving today and just sifting through the things that we saw, just thought, you know what, we're gonna save the other topic that we were going to bring up or that we were going to discuss tonight.
I think it was great going to this rally today. And I think there's some things that we really want to unpack after being there.
Yeah, for us, this issue is hugely important. For us, it is a human issue, right? And it's don't separate families in detention centers, right? Like, don't separate mommies from their babies or daddies from their babies or husband. Like, just,
and it's great that that's a point that we've all been able to come together and agree on.
It's easy, right? Like,
right.
Of course.
Right. Don't
put kids in cages or in detention centers or prohibit siblings from hugging in detention centers. Yeah. And it was really interesting being at the rally today because there's so much togetherness, right? There's such a sense of like faith in humanity, that we can move forward together, that we are all part of this beautiful picture, this tapestry that says, not on our watch. We want familias unidas, or how unidos or unidas. Golly, bless it. It's like been hace mucho tiempo.
It's been a minute.
Familias unidas, las familias. Yeah. Anyway, all that to say,
people of all backgrounds, and honestly, it was great for my stereotypes to be challenged walking into that rally and seeing people of demographics that maybe I wouldn't have expected to be there, which is my own prejudice.
Right.
And it was a great reminder of like, get off your high horse, Nicole. Like, yes, there are middle-aged white men who are here and who care, and there, whatever other stereotypes I had. As I was walking into the rally, it was this great sense of hope of like, look at how much we can come together. And I think you and I also both struggled with some of the signs that we saw that took it to a point that it demonized the other side, or what I guess those people would consider the other side. So it was both this beautiful sense of hope that we're coming together about something that we think is really important. And I think you also saw stuff that, at least for me, felt like we're going just as far on the other side to demonize the other side. Yeah,
it's a practice in dehumanization and reducing people, even people that you abhor and disagree with and want out of office. Like, the I would submit that there's nothing wrong with the righteous anger. You are mad on behalf of these families. You are mad on behalf of what's happening. Like, I can get in a place of rage real quick and indignation real quick.
Yeah.
And I can get judgy and critical. And quite frankly, like,
well, I absolutely was devastated the day that I woke up and found out. Actually, I didn't wake up. I was on a flight from Denver to London the night that we cast our votes, got on a plane, and when we landed in Heathrow, I found out that Donald Trump had won the election. And I was physically Jeff had to give me space because I was devastated. And so I can at the same time admit that I don't feel like this person should be in office, but I also have to really challenge myself, and I would challenge all of us to recognize that Donald Trump is a child of God. Yeah. I just don't think there's any benefit in us demonizing each other. Like,
it's demonizing, dehumanizing. We are taking away our common humanity when we do this. And I think when Nicole and I were seeing these signs, like, some of us were like, so beautiful. And actually, do you have some beautiful. Of them that are,
I do.
We took some pictures today, but some of them were just accosted you a bit that, it's F Trump. I'll spare your ears on the podcast, but F Trump. There's one read some beautiful ones, but there's one in particular that was written about Trump that I just thought, oh my gosh, we just can't be doing this.
And
this
I don't even want to give it airtime,
Yeah, you know what? That's a good word.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
But what I would say is, can we all just think about, I think we need to have we need to show up for stuff like this, and we need to fight for things that we believe in.
Yeah.
And I think we need to watch ourselves when it comes to this whole aspect of dehumanization. Yes. And it can happen easily in our anger.
So easily. Well, in dehumanizing and how easily we place higher worth on people for certain things, or less worth on people for certain things, and qualities that they have. And it's just so easy to put, devil horns over Trump or Jeff Sessions because of actions that they have taken that I would submit are abhorrent.
And we can have those.
Yes, we can have those feelings.
Views.
We can hold space for that. And I can hold space for my friends, dear friends, who voted for Donald Trump without going, I can't believe. It's like, how can I also get to respect them. I can and need to hold space because we all have reasons for the way we're operating. Like, I don't know that I get to judge somebody for that action. Can I ask questions? Can I hold space for curiosity? Yes. But when it turns into judgment and I'm placing worth on them as a person as a result, that's a problem with my heart, not their decision and who they voted for.
This reminds me of the book Crucial Conversations.
Oh yeah, I know. You've mentioned that before.
Yeah. Actually, my whole family read it because we, within just my nuclear family and our spouses, we have people with very different political viewpoints, religious viewpoints, you name it. We've got it all. Yeah. And in the past, we've sort of struggled to talk to each other in a respectful way. Especially me, I'll get heated or just leave the room or I can just get to that place where it's this isn't helpful for anybody. And I feel further away from you as a family member than the intention of this conversation where it started was to try to understand, but wow, I'm so beyond that. And I think it was, we try to go on a family vacation every year, every couple of years when we can. But I think it was this past year, we were staying at a cabin in the Georgia mountains, and my dad and I started talking about race. And we actually had a pretty healthy dialogue to a point. This is always how it happens, right? And we sort of reached a tipping point, and later my dad was sitting down with my brother and me, and he said, which I think was great, he's like, I don't want to just talk about the weather with you guys. Like, you're my family.
Yeah.
And if we can't talk about this stuff, like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, so good.
And so it was that, like, maybe 6 or 8 months later, my brother read Crucial Conversations, and he texted it to all of us and was like, I really think as a family we should read this book.
Nice, Matt.
Yeah. And so we did. And I think the biggest thing, and it was cool, I actually was in town staying with my mom and dad the weekend that my dad finished it. And so just for some context, my dad and I are probably furthest apart, at least politically.
Sure.
And then my mom and I are pretty similar. My brother and I are probably furthest apart religiously. So anyways, there's some dynamic, but my dad and I have definitely struggled, especially around politics, to dialogue in a healthy way. And his biggest takeaway from the book, he's like, I realized that sometimes I enter conversation and I become so fixated on winning or debating that I lose what you just said, that sense of curiosity of like, this is somebody I love. This is somebody I respect. How do I have some curiosity for like, how is that your viewpoint? Like, help me understand, because we obviously approach this very differently. Like, protecting that dignity of a family member or close friend to say like, I love you and I respect you. Help me understand how you've arrived there, and to have genuine curiosity. And it's just been awesome to see how it's affected the way that we dialogue with one another. And I think, I guess that's all I'll say. I'll put the book in the show notes. It's a great book. I think it's useful for business context, family, friends, whatever it is. But I just love that notion of like having curiosity and respect for each other, and starting there, like you said, even for your friends that you like. I have people in my life who voted for Donald Trump, which is a decision I cannot understand as a woman and as a person of faith, and like everything that I believe. For me, it feels like in direct opposition, and I'm going to be blunt about that. I really do, and it's really hard for me to understand how somebody who values women, somebody who is a follower of Jesus, I'm just going to say it. It's hard for me from where I sit to understand how you could have cast that vote. And I need to approach conversations with the people in my life who did, genuine curiosity of like, I know you and what you value. Help me understand this. And maybe I still won't, but let's stop demonizing each other, and let's stop saying you're just an idiot, or you're just,
or how could you, using very loaded language. How could you? What were you I read a sign today. I'm sorry to give it airtime, but it just reminds me of this moment. Have you no shame? It's like, okay, it's just very like, and I'm guilty of this, left and right, all the way up. What is that phrase?
Let's not pretend that we're not.
Oh gosh. Like, it's like, I can say this all day long in the comfort of a safe relationship, but really quickly, that's the beauty of safe relationships, right? Like, we can say this and air this so that we can practice healthier mechanisms or talk through healthier mechanisms, so that when the next challenging conversation comes up with a friend or family member, we're like, okay, I at least remember talking to my dear friend Nicole about what it looks like to hold curiosity in this moment. Okay, now I've at least broached that. It's in my brain, right?
And I don't want to. I still think there's such a place. To be a strong advocate for the poor or for the oppressed.
Amen,
I don't want to sugarcoat that, because I strongly believe that. And I'm not saying that we need to dance around those topics. And I think we need to bring more dignity. We need to recognize all of us. Whether, I don't care what side of the political spectrum or religious spectrum, wherever it is you sit, let's take a minute to, even today, like when you said namaste to me, let's, what does that mean?
The light in me sees the light in you.
Let's honor the light in each other, and let's start there. Even when it's hard.
Well, here's the deal. Even when it looks like there is no...
Even when we've convinced ourselves there is no light.
So this is interesting. Luke Gifford said this on his podcast. And he was talking about, if I recall correctly, being a hunter of your own darkness, and so going inward with yourself, I'm telling you, it's powerful. Girl, they were preaching a word. Anyway, but what I'm saying is, or what I'm trying to get at is, even when we can't see the light in others, here's what we get to remember. And this is what I'm tying it back into what Luke said. Light is as dark to God. There is no dichotomy. That is not a dualistic thing. Light and dark, one and the same, baby. So if I don't see light in Donald Trump, even the darkness that I see, but both are equal to God. So I still get to practice looking at Donald Trump as a child of God, a broken individual who I wildly disagree with and have trouble not hating most days. And yet, that is a reflection of me and my insecurity and insecurity in a way that's like, I don't know how to unpack insecurity just yet. So I'm going to table that. I've got some work to do around that. But it's basically what I would submit is it's a reflection of me. And
him. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's both.
He ignites a little bit.
Both.
Sure.
But are we ever really going to evoke the type of change that we want to see in our country if we're not starting at a place of dignity and respect for everybody's humanity?
Yes.
Full fucking stop.
Totally. That's so interesting. Like,
I promised myself I wasn't going to drop an F-bomb tonight.
It's the fullness of expression. It's the fullness of expression. So,
oh, sorry, Dad.
All is fair. I know, all is fair.
Grandma.
I think what it is for me is that I want to be. It's so interesting the way this conversation is taking a toll, but this is the beauty of it, right? Like, or a turn for this.
It's taking a toll too.
Yeah, maybe so. I think for me, what it comes down to is, yes, can Donald Trump make me so mad, and can the horrific, in my opinion, this is my worldview, acts against the way that these asylum seekers are being treated when they come to our country after having done, we have heard stories about people doing things the right way, leaving their country under horrifically strenuous, stressful circumstances, having to leave at a moment's notice in the middle of the night, like fearing for their lives and the lives of their children. And they get here and they're put in handcuffs. Does that make me so angry? I don't even know what to do with my anger. Yes. And here's what I believe about what I think could be true for me as I continue to unpack my own emotions, as I continue to get to know the Lord more. Oh gosh, that was very Christian of me to refer to him as the Lord. Haven't done that since.
And him.
And Kim counselor days. As I continue to show up as a fully defined self, what I'm saying to myself is, what would it look like, Meredith, for you to be appropriately indignant, but not so moved that your spirit just shakes all over the place when Donald Trump says something offensive, or when something happens again? Like, I want to be at a place where I'm so grounded in God, in the I don't know, in my. It's hard to say these things because I honestly don't. I have trouble trusting that God's at work with what we're seeing happen and the stories that we're hearing. And yet, how can I get to a place where I'm so rooted that, to use a Chronicles of Narnia term, that Aslan is on the move, that I go, I get to have righteous indignation because you're on the move and you've asked me to be on the move with you. Mm-hmm. And I get to choose an appropriate type of anger and not one that is demonizing to others, it's demonizing to Donald Trump or to people who voted for him that also might happen to be family and friends. Like, how do I practice this well? The
groundedness. One example that really challenged me after the election, there was a Duke professor who was, I think she was on a podcast. I can find the episode because it was so beautiful and so challenging. I think it was the day after the election. She was with her students. I think she's a professor in Duke Seminary.
You sent this to me.
Did I?
It was on the liturgist. Didn't they interview her?
She spoke about it beautifully, and as crushed as she was, and her entire class was, or the majority of them, they prayed for Donald Trump and his administration, and because to them that was the Christ-like thing to do.
It was the next best step.
Yeah, because if we can't be rooting against him at this point, we have to be rooting for, and I'm not saying sugarcoating the things that we believe are, I hate to use the word wrong, but
I'm getting fiery now. Abhorrent. It's like, okay, Mary.
Yeah.
Unload the gun.
But yeah, to me, that is an example of what you're talking about, of like, what is the grounded approach to this? Yes. And how do we set an example and a standard to just approach this from a grounded way and not take the low route, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, the low hanging fruit, which is so easy to take because
it
makes
is.
us mad. Our anger feels good. It feels righteous. It feels like, well, how could you not be with me? If you're not with me, you're against me type of mentality. And Brene talks a lot about that in the Brave in the Wilderness book. But to me, I would say grounded. I would say rooted. I would say the concept that I'm learning a lot about now in counseling is living from a principled place. And so it's less about reactivity and just being able to observe what's going on and then to respond appropriately from a principled place, not from...
In terms of knowing what are the principles that ground you.
Yes, your principles. Principles. You got to... Hello, Nicole's toe. You have to get defined as a person, figure out your principles, what you're living from, and respond as a defined whole person, not as a reactive, insecure,
even
you know what
mean.
It is. Yeah.
I got mean.
Yes, and where's that coming from?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so one thing I want to circle back around to, when you talked about holding space for curiosity for other people whose maybe voting decisions just flat confuse you, right? Or you just disagree with, or I disagree with, whatever, right? Is holding curiosity for yourself. You know, one of the things that my counselor, D, says, okay, well, what's God teaching you about you in this? It's like, okay, so what?
I've got a lot of work to
exactly.
do.
It's like, okay, thank you for the conviction. Here's your $80. I gotta go. You know what I mean? Like, how can I hold curiosity for what's coming up in my body about this? Where am I feeling anxiety? Am I reacting here? Okay, I probably am. What's that coming from? So it's coming from fear. For me, that's my personality.
Can I ask, what is God teaching you about you?
That's such a good question. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that I care about this issue. Like, God is showing me, like, this is still a beat of your heart. And I'm walking closely enough with the Spirit, really pulling out all the Christian language tonight.
Yeah.
To have my spirit pricked when I see signs that are just so filled with messages that are just against. I don't even want to give hate enough credence, but they're just against. And it doesn't feel constructive. It doesn't feel constructive. Like when we're all together and we're chanting together, we rise. Gosh. It's like, yes, beautiful. Amen. Yeah. And when it says forward, when I see signs that say forward together, I'm like, yes, together. Yes. And families deserve to be together. Yes, those are things I want to herald and champion. So what is God showing me about me? I think this isn't profound, but it's obvious, like that I deeply care about the issue, and kind of along those lines of walking with the Spirit closely enough to know, like, okay, there is a way to do this that can be constructive and helpful. And honestly, I'll say it, as a person of faith, okay, I'll tell you what God's teaching me right now. I feel like I just got a little insight.
Wow, yeah, I saw it in your face.
Oh gosh, yeah. Like, okay, Lord, I hear you. I feel like what he's asking me is, do you believe I'm still good in the midst of all this? In the midst of learning about a 7-year-old being separated from her mom, living in a detention center, apart from her mom, they have no clue when they're being reunited. Do you believe that I'm still good? Oh gosh. Like, that's what he's like, literally in that moment. I'm not trying to be all like I'm a medium, but I just, in that moment, it's like, here's the reflection for me, because I'm like, okay, what do we do around this? What do we do around this? And I'm like, I am failing to remember that there is a mysticism, and there is I'm going to call it a spiritual mysticism. There is something that happens that is outside of us. Like, God, I have to believe, otherwise I'll go crazy, that God, Aslan, however you'd like to relate to him, is still on the move. And if he's not, I don't even know what to say about any of it. He has to be. Quite frankly, I'm holding his feet to the fire. I'm like,
she has to be.
She, he, she. Amen, sister. All of it. He and she. Yeah. He and she have to be.
God has to be.
God has to be. Yeah. The divine has to be on the move. And I get to choose that even in this remarkable amount of pain, this I don't even have words in the English language.
I mean, we literally saw a family, their parents, 5 kids, whose dad is facing deportation again. And the little boy, he couldn't have been probably older 8. Than, I was thinking, I stink at telling which ages kids are, but I was thinking 6, 7.
Sure. He might have been that,
little boy standing in front of his dad, and as his mom is telling us their story, he's just crying. Yeah. He's just fighting back tears the whole time because he's listening to his mom talk about the times in his life that his dad wasn't in his life, and now the realization that his dad probably won't be in his life again. And I couldn't not. I mean, when you say heartbreaking, that's the type of heartbreaking that we're talking about. Is the face of a little boy who is going to lose his dad probably and doesn't know when they'll be reunited.
Yes,
and that's just one story.
It's incomprehensible what these families are going through. The fear, the having to live in the shadows.
I know.
I just, all of it is too overwhelming to me. Know. And here's the challenge that I feel like God's saying. Not just, do you believe I'm still good in the midst of this, but like, do you believe, like, I believe his heart is torn up about this. Mm-hmm. And I can say that because mine is, and I'm made in his image. Like, I believe it absolutely is. Yeah. And I don't think, well, I don't know what, I'm going to say this, and I don't know if I believe this or not.
It's okay.
Or I don't know if this is the right word to say this, to use it to describe it.
Okay.
I don't think he's overwhelmed by it, simply because he is, my view of him is that he is omnipotent. And I don't mean to say, well, he's got the whole world in his hands, he's got it all under control. No, it's a real shit show out there. And yet I still believe in his sovereignty. So I don't know. That's the mystical thing for me. I'm holding those two together. I'm like, I don't know if you got the whole world in your hands, Lord. It's horrific out there, and we're just talking about one facet of immigration and one particular subsect of people. Yeah. We're not even talking about the Syrian refugee crisis or anything else going on in the world, like
or any of the other number of issues.
Oh, totally. Like what? You can't possibly have the whole world in your hands, and yet there is this mysticism that even if I can't understand it, and I'm not just saying this to like reconcile my heart, like, well, just, put her there, kid. And, God's in control. It's all going to work out. I don't know that it is. Yeah. I don't know what is. And yet God is asking me, I feel like in this moment, do you still believe that I am good even in the midst of this? Mm-hmm. Anyway, that was a long-winded way to answer your question.
That's great.
So that's that. What do you feel like? Can we flip the tables back on you as it relates to immigration?
Yeah.
And what you saw today, what you feel like God's teaching you about yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been learning this for a while now. There was a book that I read when I was in college that talked about there's different seasons that a lot of people go through. So I was studying church leadership, right? Because that was the path I was headed down, which maybe you don't know about me yet, but I was headed down the path of wanting to go to seminary.
Heck of a pastor, heck of a preacher. That's what it is, not preacher, communicator, yep.
That is not the path I ended up going down at all, but that was where I was headed when I was an undergrad. And I remember I was in a church leadership course, and I read this book. I don't even know that I can remember what it was, but essentially the author was talking about how we tend to go through different seasons in our life, and sometimes we are in the pew, hands raised,
sure,
praising God.
Sure. Sometimes
we're at the front serving communion. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we're outside throwing rocks at the window because we're indignant, and like that's the season that we're in. And not from a faith perspective, but I've been feeling that way. Politically, I've been really overwhelmed, and engaging, if I'm being honest, engaging at the macro level has been exhausting and overwhelming to me. And it just feels like I don't even know where to start right now. And I think I've been learning that it's okay for me to have that season. And what I've been trying to do is just get really micro. Yeah. I still believe that there's work for me to do and there's work that I'm being called to, but I'm in a season that it's exhausting for me to even consider doing that at the macro level. And so instead, I've been trying to engage at the micro level. And that's actually how I met Sarah. She runs a hospitality home for immigrants who are being released from detention centers. She runs a visitation program where she and hundreds of volunteers visit detainees. So yeah, I think I'm on a journey of like living in the micro level and just trying to engage in each human that I encounter around this issue or different issues. And that's kind of the only place I can exist right now. Totally. And I'm trying to just accept that and not put pressure on myself for anything else right now.
And the freedom to be able to do that and to not feel like, oh, I've got to hustle because here's what I do. And this is what I mean by living grounded and from a place of having to trust that God, it's like for my own mentality, I have to trust that God's still in control, whatever that means, even if I think he's not at my core. I don't even know how to put language around this, but like, let me say it this way. I don't even know that I can give myself freedom to do that because I think it all depends on you. I'm overly responsible for so many things. I think if you don't call Congress members, who will? If you don't rally the troops, who will? If you don't tell people on social media, who will?
Which is a great, I think.
I mean, yeah, it's a both
great
and.
To a point. Sure. Yeah, I think it's great that we recognize, and man, we've gotten really religious tonight, which.
But it's a part of
that's part of our worldview. But like, what I was going to say is like, I think it's a good thing for us to recognize that we are the hands and feet of Jesus, if that's who we believe in, right? No one else is, right? And that doesn't mean that God isn't still moving in mysterious ways and big ways, but a big way that God is moving is through us.
We are the co-creators of this stuff.
Yeah, and so
partners.
I think that can be a really healthy thing to feel. I think, like anything, it can cross a line of you feeling too much responsibility and too much
unrest, quite frankly. Yeah. Over responsibility and unrest to the point that my soul, I'm operating out of fear and insufficiency versus out of a place of sufficiency and principled living and going, okay, like Aslan is still on the move, even if I can't see him. And like, what's my role in this? I'm not going to be overwhelmed.
I need to take a nap today.
Yeah, even if I need to take a nap, even if I don't call a Congress member, we're all like, okay, like it does. The whole world doesn't fall on you, and you still get to co-create. But figuring out what that is, and one of the ways that we can stay involved, I think, is continuing to show up with each other and have these conversations. So I don't know what that looks like for folks, but like maybe it's just finding safe people where you can sit on a couch with a good cup of tea like we are right now and show up for yourself, show up for the other person, and just unpack these big issues that whether you agree or disagree, you can at least have someone safe to where you can say something that might sound dumb in your head and the other person's not even fazed by it. That is it. You know what I'm saying? Like that sometimes is the next right thing, to just stay aware and to stay connected. I mean, I don't know. I think I've been thoroughly Brené'd since even episode 1. I mean, I hadn't been Brené'd fully then. We were talking about vulnerability, but golly, this Brave in the Wilderness book is wrecking me in the best way. I'm like, Brené, you are this. I mean, she is, talk about preaching a word. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Bringing it. So this concept of being connected and this, I think too, like, how can I remain soft towards people who hold signs that I find like eye roll inducing? I'm like, oh, that's not helping. Like, how can I even remain curious about them? How can I create space for them and to see that they are scared and hurt? Somebody was saying on a podcast, I think it was the Typology podcast, Ian Cron. It's an Enneagram podcast, in case you're not familiar with the Typology podcast, whoever of you might be listening to this, but talking about how a lot of people, because the 6s are driven by fear, how there's so many of us in the world that it's
you guys are the most common.
We're the most common. How it's unfair and how rampant it is that we are preyed upon, that our fear is preyed upon. Yeah. So people reacting, even politically, I just wonder how many of us are 6s believing the hype that we can't overcome evil with good. You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yep. No, I totally know what you're talking about. I totally know the episodes you're talking about. And it's fascinating to think about, because this, and we haven't talked about the Enneagram. We will. But because a personality type that is more prone to make fear-based decisions is actually the majority, a lot of advertisements and politicians, they prey upon that. Or they appeal to that fear sense in you to try to get you to buy their thing or vote the way that they want you to.
Totally.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
It is. And so even just that awareness is super helpful.
So where do you want to leave this discussion?
We belong together. We belong to each other. We are image bearers of the divine, of God, however you would like to qualify that. We are, as Brené says, inextricably connected, and we get to express the beauty in that. It's an opportunity. It's an invitation daily. I know it sounds so lovely in a beautiful Denver loft with a cup of tea and a couch. And when you actually are faced with it, it's like, what?
It can get messy.
Extremely messy and extremely loaded. Charged is a good word for it. And this concept of still showing up anyway because of the connection that we share as human beings, I think is I don't know. It's just something that I'm trying to become more mindful of. So I'm not going to speak for everyone, and maybe it, speaks to you, listener. But for me, I'm like, okay, we're connected. That's
Cheers
it.
to that, sister.
Thanks for listening to the Room for Both podcast. We're always open for feedback, so if there was something that you resonated with or would like for us to discuss, please visit roomforbothpodcast.com or find us on Instagram at roomforbothpodcast and drop us a line. And also, while you're at it, would you do us a solid and rate this podcast so that we can eventually pay our sound guy?